welcome to this video of Waymaker, another interesting and creative plugin by Aqeel Aadam Sound that's available for Windows, Mac and iOS devices. I had a look at Ridgewalk in an earlier video also by Aqeel Aadam, so do check that out. You can click on the box in the top right of your screen, and I'll also put a link in the description. Waymaker is a creative sequencer, or more accurately, a number of sequences that can be strung together to interact with one another in a variety of ways, giving complicated or ever-evolving sequences of Midi data. Waymaker can also interact with Ridgewalk and Weeping Wall, so that audio can be manipulated too. On the surface, each sequencer may appear simple and straightforward, but each offers randomization possibilities, and of course it's in the interaction of each sequencer that more complex results can be achieved. So if we start looking at the step sequencer, by clicking in the central section, you'll see that we can have up to 16 steps. The pitch is entered via the sliders, and for a rest, notes can be switched off individually. Selecting the Edit Stages tab will let us adjust the velocity and gate length of each note. If I select the Back tab, you'll see that it's also possible to set the scale of the sequence. On the right of the screen, you can switch on a sequence reset for a number of bars of your choosing. So if you, for example, have set up a sequencer with an odd number of notes, you may well want the sequence to reset to the first note of the sequence after, say, 4 bars. Or you may have 2 sequences running at the same time, so a sequencer reset every few bars is probably desirable. So the step sequencer is the most straightforward of all the sequences. You can choose a number of steps, as I mentioned earlier, so if I want to add some more steps, I'll just click on that, click play. I've set up a phase plant with the pluck sound just so we can hear some of the sequences. We'll go back to 6 steps. By clicking back, let's change key. So I'll change it to D minor. Put it back to C. So that's the first time of sequencer, step sequencer. The chain box here in the center of the screen will become more relevant as you add sequences to your sequencing chain. Here you can reorder or change the type of sequencer currently running. So let's change this sequencer to the next type, which is Morph. Let's examine this in more detail. We can see that if I press play, I'm going to hear 8 random notes within the range of C3 to C5. So if I reduce that range, we'll say C4 to C5. And each time it cycles through, every loop, it will make one random change. So that time it was this value. And this time it was this value that got altered. So we can set it to make 3 changes to be more noticeable. And we can set that maybe to be every 4th pattern. So it'll make 3 changes every 4 loops. So as we're approaching the loop point, there's the 3 changes. So up to 16 steps are possible, and equally you can choose which steps are switched off, like so. Similarly, edit stages will let you edit the velocity of each note, as well as the note length. One setting that also applies to the previous sequencer is that the duration of the note, I forgot to mention this, can be edited here, so we can go from 8th notes as we were there to quarter notes, 16th, etc., 16th dotted, right up to whole bars, 2 bars, maximum of 16 bars. So if you're, for example, creating chords, which we'll look at later, you can set the duration of those chords. So let's go back again to the list of sequences, and I shall come to weight and sum later. as they are most affected when interacting with other sequences. Let's have a look at Brownian, which is probably best summarized by the text on the screen. A semi-random sequencer based on Brownian motion, in which your melody has a chance to ascend or descend from the current pitch. So let's have a look at the Brownian sequencer in action if I hit play. You'll see the values on the screen are changing. And if I click here, you'll see there's a 60% of the chance of a note falling, which means there's a 40% chance of the note going up. If it falls, it goes down at the moment set to a second. If it goes up, it's set to a fifth. So we can change these values and change a minimum and a maximum range so that it doesn't exceed. If it keeps falling, it won't fall below C3, and if it keeps rising, it won't rise above C5. So let's stack our first modifying element to the chain. If I select the plus symbol on the right, then move down the list to select Chord, you'll see that we can take notes generated by the Brownian sequencer and turn them into chords. So I'll go back to the Brownian sequencer and slow things down. If I click in the center, you'll see that every 8th note is selected. Let's put that onto, let's make that a whole bar. And we'll go back now to the chords, and you'll see that every time that random note is triggered, it's going to add a 3rd and a 5th in the key of C minor. So there we have ascending and descending chords based on the Brownian sequencer. So let's add a third modifier to our chain, beat. It defaults to a Euclidean rhythm, so you can specify the number of beats divided by the number of steps, in this case up to 32 steps. You can also create your own rhythm and choose whether notes are masked or sustained until the active next step. So here I've set up a simple Euclidean rhythm of 3 steps in every 8. Note that you can also offset the beats too. So if I step back to our Brownian sequencer, click in the center and increase the generated notes to every quarter note, you'll see the chain is generating the Brownian random notes within C minor, which in turn is being converted into a chord, and the generated chord is being played back by the beat sequencer. So if I step back again to the first sequencer in the chain and increase the notes generated to every 8th note, you'll see that 2 chords are allowed through in the faster time interval. By now you should be realizing the vast possibilities of having multiple sequences running at the same time. By selecting different time values and the number of steps, polyrhythmic opportunities abound. And with some of the random options available, sequences can evolve and mutate over time, subtly or chaotically. I got as far as 17 stacked sequences before giving up. Waymaker had beaten me. I'm not sure how many simultaneous processes you can have chained together, but Waymaker offers more than you'll need for any practical purpose. So let's have a look at the sequences I skipped over earlier. With a simple 6-step sequencer in the first stage, if I add weight, you'll see that I can transpose notes by intervals of my choosing based on random percentages. If I substitute weight for sum, you'll see that it accumulates pitches by flipping on and off at independent rates, giving a rising pitch effect to patterns. Probability is probably the easiest utility to explain. By simply dialing down the large percentage in the middle, you reduce the chance of notes in the prior sequencer in the chain being triggered. Finally, notes can be routed to different MIDI channels using the channel sequencer. Between 2 and 5 channels can be chosen, and the resulting notes within sequences can be routed to different MIDI devices and distributed randomly, rotated, duplicated, or by a shift register distribution. So let's have a look at mixing 2 note-generating sequences together, as there are some extra modes to be aware of. We'll start off with this sequence of notes in the step sequencer, and let's add the Morph sequencer as being next in the chain. So let's reduce the pitch range to be a more manageable value. And to give us more variation, let's change the resolution to dotted notes. You'll notice that at the top of the screen, it's showing us that the Morph sequencer is transposing the Midi of the step sequencer. If we change this to Generate, you'll see that both sequencers are allowing notes through. An interesting variation is that of branching sequences. This takes a bit of working out what is going on, and I encourage you to experiment. To keep things manageable, I found that a probability value of around 20% ensures that branching sequences are generated in a manageable way. I also like the transpose and keep value notes switched on. But different sequences yield different results, and your mileage may vary. So let's take this sequence and, to flesh it out, add some random chords in the C minor scale and set a bass line to play along, also in C minor. So to that sequencer, I've added Omnisphere for the chords and I've added Hive for a bass line using the techniques we looked at earlier. So if I press play, each time we'll get a slightly randomized variation. The chords will be random every time, the bass line will be random every time, and the melody will evolve from the original pattern that we set. So let's try that a second time when we'll hear a subtle variation on a theme. And a third time. So here's the real-world example that you heard earlier on in the video, in the introductory music. 4 instances of Waymaker are triggering faceplant. 4 different sounds. You'll see some of them would appear to be playing rather quickly, but they've got a low percentage chance of a note occurring. So let's start off with 4 separate sounds to give us the composition that you heard earlier. As well as controlling Midi, Waymaker can also affect audio when using other plugins by Aqeel Aadam, such as Ridgewalk or Weeping Wall. To show that in action, I've fed the first 2 tracks from Faceplant into Ridgewalk. At its heart, Ridgewalk is a looper, though I really urge you to check out the earlier video I mentioned for a full run-through of Ridgewalk's capabilities. So, Ridgewalk is doing its thing on the first 2 tracks and creating additional ambience by looping the sound and performing some sort of granular wizardry on the audio. If we load another instance of Waymaker, you can see that you can connect it to Ridgewalk to work with the audio. You have access to the same sequences as before, but to keep it simple, I'll show you this example that pops up by default. Shift. With it, we can pitch shift the audio by sensible amounts such as fifths and octaves, and this is the result. Well, I hope these examples illustrated Waymaker's capabilities and gave you an idea if Waymaker can be incorporated into your working methods. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to be notified of future videos. It's free of charge and it helps the channel to grow. So until the next one, thanks for watching.